Welcome to the inaugural series of the Humor Career Insights podcast, your guide to navigating career success. I'm your host, Vachechi Bafa, a certified professional career coach, human resources consultant, and founder of Humor. Whether you're just starting out or transitioning after years of service, this podcast is your go-to resource for invaluable tips and strategies. In this first series, we are diving into the topic of career transitions, especially pertinent during these uncertain times. Join us as we explore practical insights and expert advice to propel your career forward in the ever-evolving professional landscape. So buckle up and get ready to navigate career transitions with confidence. Let's embark on this journey together. Don't forget to rate and follow. Today, we have a very special episode lined up for you. In our previous episodes, we've covered a wide range of topics. We kicked off the series with episode 1, where we discussed managing change and shared practical tips for thriving in times of transition. In episode 2, we delved into forced transitions and how to find opportunities in adversity. Episode 3 was all about voluntary transitions, focusing on how to take control of your career moves. And in episode 4, we discussed the critical first 90 days in a new job and how to make the most of this period. Last but not least, episode 5 was dedicated to building resilience during career transitions, where we shared personal stories and strategies to stay strong and motivated. Today's episode is particularly special as we will be recapping the entire series with a fantastic guest who has a unique perspective on career transitions. Our guest started in the corporate world and has since transitioned into the humanitarian sector in the information technology space. He will help us tie together all the themes we've discussed and share his personal journey of navigating career transitions. So, without further ado, let's welcome our guest. Welcome, Keith, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Vache, and thank you for having me. I'm super stoked to be here.
We're very honored to have you here. Thank you for finding time to be here. We know that you're a very busy man. Let's dive straight into our questions. Can you share your personal career journey? How did you move from the corporate world to the humanitarian sector?
Thank you. You're too kind. So let me start off by giving a disclaimer, saying that the views and opinions that I'm going to express here are solely mine. I'm not representing anybody but myself in this conversation. So now that's out the way. Upon my undergrad graduation, I was headhunted by the top IT firm in the country. And then within a time span of 9 years, I rose to head up the professional services division. I then transitioned to several other private sector firms in Zambia, DRC, where I worked for another 4 or 5 years before I set up my own thing and did my consulting. Thereafter, I then made the big leap to the humanitarian sector, where I joined a big NGO. And then from there, I then transitioned into an international organization.
Ooh, that sounds like a big leap, definitely from the corporate world to the humanitarian world. What motivated you to make such a significant transition? What factors made you realize it's time to jump away from the corporate world?
So it's a number of factors, actually. Firstly, my personality, especially when I was younger, was to always seek out new challenges. So, I'd felt I'd, put in my time within the corporate sector, and I was seeking out new challenges. And the challenge I got didn't get much bigger than the opportunity that I had to go to the island nation of Haiti, that in 2010 suffered a really, really devastating earthquake. And then secondly, and I'll be honest, I was curious. I was curious to learn more about how humanitarian organizations worked, how they went about their business. Finally, and I guess most importantly, I think, as I was watching the situation on TV in Haiti, I got a sense of compassion, a sense of wanting to do something to help. And then when the opportunity came, it was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer for me to go. It was almost like the stars aligned for me to do this. It was a no-brainer for me to go to Haiti and join the humanitarian sector. But That being said, nothing could have prepared me for what I witnessed in Haiti, especially the first few months. It was my first foray in the humanitarian sector, and it happened to be the world's largest ever humanitarian response. The situation was desperate. The needs were so much. Yeah, it was a really rough transition.
I've had the opportunity to be in Haiti, although it was after the devastating earthquake. So things had settled down a little bit. So I can imagine how traumatic that must have been. Would you say that you enjoyed some aspects of helping people?
Oh, absolutely. I think the impact is immediate, right? You go out, you see people who've lost everything, their entire belongings, their entire livelihood, their entire documentation, paperwork, everything, literally, right? And they have nowhere to start, they have nowhere to live, they have no food, and then you come there, and you assist, whether it's by providing accommodation for them, whether you're giving them food rations just for them to get by. So you can actually see the impact immediately, and so that's one of the most gratifying things that I think I can say, is within the humanitarian. You see the impact of your work, especially in emergency response situations. You see the impact of your work, and you get a feeling that in your own small way, you're making a difference in people's lives.
It certainly sounds like you had found your passion, your purpose, your ikigai. Speaking of which, have you listened to our previous episodes?
As it turns out, I listen to all your podcasts.
Thank you very much for the support. Now, Ikigai is one of the things that we discussed in one of our previous episodes. And I would like you now to help us tie together some of the themes that we discussed in our episodes, starting with episode 1, where we talked about managing change. What are some practical tips you found useful in managing change during your career transitions?
The first one, I think, is self-belief. You've got to believe in yourself. You mustn't have imposter syndrome. And I know this is something you spoke about at length in your podcast. And, in my experience, it's amazing what a little self-belief can do with respect to you being able to deliver, but also to get the buy-in and respect of your peers and colleagues. So, I always say to myself, especially when I transition to a new job, I did not get here by accident. I got this opportunity because I demonstrated during the recruitment process that I have the ability, I have the experience. So I have that self-belief that out of thousands of potential candidates, I'm the one who made it, and so that by itself gives me the oomph I need to get things done. Right. So that's the first thing. I think that's really important. The second one is never settling, never be in the comfort zone. I particularly like the saying that says, all growth starts at the end of your comfort zone. So always, have some sort of discomfort. And once you start getting comfortable in any endeavor, then it's perhaps time to think about transitioning. Third tip that I think would be useful would be around keeping an open mind. As you transition, you speak to different people, you do a lot of research around the organization or the role that you'll be taking. And I always try and avoid external influences to bias my opinion about a role or an organization. I always want to form an opinion based on my personal experiences rather than what I've heard. The fourth one, which is pretty straightforward, is willingness to learn. You must be willing to learn. So if I was to summarize, practical tips, I'd say it's a mixture of open-mindedness, quiet confidence, and humility. I'd say this is a surefire formula.
Okay, thank you for those great tips. In episode 2, we talked about forced transitions and finding opportunities in adversity. Have you experienced any forced transitions in your career? And if you did, how did you navigate them?
Yeah, so I'll give you 2 examples that will show the 2 different angles of this, right? So, and I'll give the Haiti example. So when I went to Haiti, I knew that my contract would end. I knew it was for a fixed amount of time, and I knew that it was dependent on funding. The contract did get extended a couple of times, but I always knew when the end date was. So with about 6 months to go, I began looking for other opportunities. First internally, because it's always easier. You understand the systems, you know the people, etc. So I updated my resume. I started working my network. This is really important. I started talking to my supervisor, that sort of thing. So I started making an effort to actually look for opportunities. And I gave myself 6 months because I know that the recruitment processes in humanitarian organizations can be slow at times. So you want to give yourself, at least 6 months of runway for actively searching for opportunities. So in this instance, I was fortunate that my employer, found me a landing spot outside of Haiti, so I was able to continue working within the same organization. However, I know for a fact that if I'd taken a passive approach to this, I don't think the outcome would have been the same. And then the second scenario, just to look at things from a different angle, I was a team lead, and I built a formidable team. This team was I called them my A team. They were on the ball. They delivered. They were smart. They were sharp. But again, we work with budgets. We work with timelines. And when I did my second, when time for budget came, I only got 50% of what I asked for. So I basically had to cut my team down by 50%. This is a team that I'd grown to know, to love. I knew the personal stories, and in as much as I tried to communicate with them, help them look for other opportunities, all the things that I had done, it just wasn't to be. And, to this day, having to let those guys go was one of the toughest things I've ever had to do.
Yeah, that's a tough situation. I've had those situations. I'm sure you listened in my episode where I talked about being let go myself and letting go. I've had to let go employees as well. And it's a really tough situation. It's just how you manage that change and prepare everybody and provide the right support. Can you share an example of how you found opportunities in what seemed like adverse situations?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few war stories I could tell, but this one particularly stands out. I had a big project in a war-torn country. I won't mention the name, but it's in the middle of Africa for anyone who's interested. I was in charge of a project, and I had to get one of my team members to come from another country to help out, to work with me on this project. So we had a huge event lined up, and as we were preparing, we're going out to the field. This country was in the middle of a war, so my team member was held hostage by some bad actors. So we then had to summon our security team. We had to negotiate, and we had to get him out. And thankfully, we managed to get him out unscathed. However, because it became a security situation, reports had to be filled. And as the security team were filling this out, they actually found out that this guy did not have an active contract. His previous contract had lapsed, and his new contract was still in process. So we had flown somebody to this country without a contract. Now, you can imagine, in addition to there being a security incident, you've got liability issues. You've got someone in country who doesn't have a contract, and then the first thing would have been to send him back. But you can't send him back because he's not an employee. How do you justify, getting the funding? So the situation got worse, and the country director was upset because now he's on the line, if anything happens to this guy. It was a tough situation. So I saw this as an opportunity, though, to showcase my problem-solving skills. And I got on the phone with my supervisor, who was in Canada at the time. I went to see the country director, who was very upset, understandably, and also got on the phone with HR and said, look, we have this situation. The recruitment was still in process. Couldn't we fast track the recruitment? Is there anything that we can do to rationalize the situation, to make sure that we then can move forward? So after much negotiations back and forth and speaking to what impact there could be legally, etc., it was found that yes, if HR expedited the process and got him the contract, and because he was a previous employee, we were good to go. So we got all the signatures, got the country director to sign, got HR. So within 2-3 hours, the guy had his contract, and we were able to go ahead. But yeah, things could have really gone south very quickly. People could have lost their jobs because of an oversight such as that. So yeah, this is just an example of some of the things that I've had to face in my career.
Even in adversity, there is professional development. And that is a classic case of a professional development in adversity.
I'll tell you one thing as well, though, just on this point. I learned, and I can guarantee you now, if ever I'm bringing a teammate or going on mission, the first thing I check is, do they have a contract? Because the learning is also just as important. And the stress levels that I went through during that time were, it was a roller coaster. Security issue, you got them out, you're safe, you find out there's no contract, you find out there's liability issues. So yeah, I learned my lesson.
You talked about stress. How do you manage stress in the humanitarian world and prevent burnout?
Burnout is the thing. It's an issue, right? And I've seen firsthand, the effects of burnout, people working long hours, especially in emergency response situations, especially when you're working with tight deadlines. You've got demanding donors, you got demands from the field, from people who, So I have seen, firsthand people burn out and people literally lose their mind. So it's something I'm acutely aware of. And for me, my formula is simple. I listen to my body. My body tells me when things are off, and it may be a headache, it may be trouble sleeping or some other manifestation. And when that happens, I then take a step back and say, okay, I need to do the things that I do to unwind. So in my case, it's either go fishing or I play golf. It's some activity where I'm by myself. I'm out in the open in nature. So yeah, I don't know if that's the clinical way to deal with it, but for me, this is what works. I just listen to my body.
Yeah, it's finding that happy place, isn't it? Your own personal happy place. Now, let's dial back to episode 3, where we talked about voluntary transitions and the box of chocolates. How did you prepare for and execute your voluntary career transition?
Okay. As I've alluded to, right, I've been on both sides of the fence, right, where I've, being very active in voluntarily looking for a career transition. But on the other side of the fence, I've also been a hiring manager. So I think, it'll be good for me to give both perspectives. So on the first perspective where, I'm looking to transition voluntarily, the first thing I do is I make sure my resume is up to date. I make sure it's customized for each, and I repeat, each position that I'm applying for. A lot of positions, the first screening is done electronically. So you want to make sure that you've got keywords that will make your resume stand out. So you actually have to put in a bit of time and work to make sure that your resume is up to date, right? The next thing is, once I've decided that, okay, it's time for me to transition, I become deliberate about it. I make it a mission to find the right opportunity. So I have to spend time scouring the internet. I have to work my network. This is really important, especially in the humanitarian sector. Make sure you have what I'd like to term godfathers, godmothers, people, your mentors, people who work with you, mentor you, help you navigate this sector, and people, most importantly, who speak about you behind closed doors. Really, really important. So you must make this a multifaceted approach. You can't just, go on jobs.com and look for jobs. You've got to do the other aspects as well, right? The third thing, and I think this is really important, seek the services of a professional. Get a career coach. Get someone who can guide you through the process. The investment, I believe, will be worth it, So if I put on my hiring manager hat, I can tell you that the margins between those that get selected and those that don't are minuscule. As an example, I'll give you a quick example. I was recently recruiting for a post. I got in excess of 700 applications. The job had only been advertised for like a week. 700 applications. Of those, the system filtered about 50%. So I had about 350 resumes that I had, as the hiring manager, had to look at, go through, review, etc. Now, I don't have time to read each and every resume, 350 of them, right? So I need to make sure that I look at the resumes, I look at the top lines, I do a quick scan to see, and if all your achievements and all the things I'm looking for on page 3, at the bottom of page 3 on the resume, I'm not likely to see it. That's just the reality of it. And so working with a career coach, they will tell you the sort of things that hiring managers look at, and they will tell you how to make sure that you stand out, because it's little things. Honestly, I can tell you this as a hiring manager. It's the little things like spelling mistakes, little things like people copying and pasting a cover letter and forgetting to change the title of the position. Because if I'm spending the time as a hiring manager to read through all this, and you couldn't take the time to make sure that you get the title of the cover letter right, it says something to me about your commitment or just how seriously you're taking this. So the career coach can and will guide you on what a hiring manager like myself will be looking at. You've got to give yourself an edge over the rest of the applicants, over the rest of the 700 plus. Sometimes I get over 1,000 applications for positions. So working with a career coach is one way you can give yourself that edge. Just to wrap up this, take your time, be patient. As I've said, it can take a long time to be hired within the humanitarian sector. When I actually joined, it took me close to 9 months from the time I actually applied to the time I actually got the offer. So it's just, sometimes they're getting better, but sometimes there is bureaucracy, there's red tape, or there's dependencies on donor funding, etc. So be patient, give yourself time, give yourself at least 6 months before you start seeing results or start getting called for interviews. Then if you're shortlisted, then you've got to prepare for the interviews, prepare for the written assessments. I always like to use the 5 Ps cliche: proper preparation prevents poor performance. Always prepare. And then finally, if and when you do the transition, do not burn your bridges. The humanitarian circle is very small. Your reputation is really important. So don't be sending nasty emails and such when you leave. Just leave nicely.
You are listening to the Huma Career Insights podcast. Remember to follow, rate, and share. I know many people think that career coaching is an expense. What's your opinion on that?
Oh, I mean, this is very simple. It's an investment. It's not an expense, right? As I mentioned, right, you want to give yourself an edge, because back to my example, the 300 people that I had to review, they all had the same qualifications. They all had the same experience. So the margins, right? How do you get that edge? So I can give various examples, right? And I like sports, so I'll use a sports analogy, right? To be at the top of your game, you can have the talent, you can have the experience, but the guys who really stand out, who are at the top of the game, your Cristiano Ronaldos, your Messis, etc. These guys have personalized coaches. These guys have nutritionists. These guys have masseuses. They have an entire team of experts in different areas, just so that they get that edge over everybody else. And so if I'm investing in my career, right, and this is something that's life-changing for me, of course I want to invest in it. I would never look at it as an expense. Again, because the career coaches have the insights that I do not have. The career coaches understand, the nuances and the things you need to do to make you stand out. Be that 1 in 700 who gets the position, because it is 1 in 1,000. And so, for me, it's not even a question of expense, because what's a few $1,000s, a few $100s, as opposed to what I can make over the entirety of my career. So, no, it's not an expense at all. It's an investment.
I like that, career coaching as an investment. Let's talk about the 90-day plan, which we spoke about in episode 4. How did you approach your first 90 days in a new role after making a significant career change?
Okay, and this will circle back to what I spoke about earlier around self-belief, not having imposter syndrome, and everything else. But one of the first things I did was to get an understanding of the pain points. What, why did they bring me here? What am I supposed to solve? What are the issues that they want resolved, right? So once I get an understanding of those pain points, I'll note them down. I will draft a plan or to prioritize them. And in my prioritization, I usually like to start with the quick wins, the cliche low-hanging fruits, because the quick wins, number one, it helps build my confidence as I get up to speed, but it also helps me get noticed quickly within the organization that, hey, the new guy we brought in is actually having an impact, right? So I also learn as much as possible during the onboarding. I read all the material. The first 30 days will be intense. That's my experience. And a lot of these humanitarian organizations, the larger organizations, do have a lot of documentation, a lot of knowledge management material that's there. You just have to take the time to read it. Do not be afraid to ask. Understand the systems, understand the processes. So, yeah, the first 30 days are really, you're like a sponge. You're absorbing as much as you can. And then from there, you put together a plan. You start with the easy things to knock off that will build your confidence, that will get you noticed within the organization. I found that's what works for me.
I like the first point you mentioned about understanding the pain points. That's one thing that I recommend during my interview coaching, that one of the questions that you should actually ask during an interview is, what are the pain points? What are your pain points? Why are you recruiting for this role? So attacking those pain points in your first 90 days is critical to success. Building resilience is a big thing in the humanitarian world. You have to be resilient, not just in the humanitarian world, in any career really. How have you built and maintained resilience throughout your career transitions?
Yeah, again, as it will touch on some of the points I brought earlier, but one of the important things is maintaining a work-life balance. Making sure that you've got your work life, and then you've got your home life. You've got time for family, friends, hobbies, the things that you enjoy. I like to keep a positive attitude because it's not all peaches and cream. You get ups and downs, but understanding, especially for me in the humanitarian sector, that what I'm doing, regardless of whether I'm on the front line or I'm in the back office, it's somehow impacting someone in need, someone less fortunate. That helps me, keeps me going, and says, okay, there's a bigger purpose for what I'm doing, right? I like to celebrate my success very much. And again, within the humanitarian sector, it's somewhat different from the corporate. This is one of the big differences that people will face. In the corporate, everything's driven by profits, and success is usually celebrated in the form of bonuses, etc. Whereas in the humanitarian sector, it's slightly different. So celebrating that success, either as a team or individually in your own way, I find very rewarding and helps build resilience. But also, I think one of the most important things for me, and I've touched upon this earlier, is that you must learn from failure. You learn. The example I gave earlier where the security situation, I learned from that. And I'll never bring on someone without a contract, for example, right? But also, and not many people will tell you this, and this will be, again, with many organizations, whether it's corporate or humanitarian, you've got to learn how to deal with and navigate office politics, especially as you move up the ladder. You just need to understand some of the dynamics and how to navigate that. It's sad, but it's a fact of life, and you need to learn how to deal with that. So all these factors help me with resilience and just powering through when sometimes I feel like things aren't perhaps going the way I want.
Thank you for those tips. Now, lessons learned. You talked about learn. So let's talk about lessons learned. What is the most important lesson you've learned from your career transitions?
Change is good. I think if I was to give you a sentence, change is good. For all the reasons I gave, no imposter syndrome, no comfort zone, etc. You always got to seek out change. It's really good. It makes you a more well-rounded person.
Change is good. A lot of us get anxious with change. A lot of us, we do not want change. We like to stay in our comfort zones. So it's inspiring to hear you saying change is good, particularly that you're in the humanitarian sector where there's so much change. In one of the episodes, we talked about managing this change, and I mentioned that change is ubiquitous. It just happens all the time, but it's just how you manage that change. So that's the positive, being positive and saying change is good. It's a good management strategy. Now, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in your career transitions?
No, not at all. I think I wouldn't have it any other way. And the way it's worked out, it's worked out really well. So I worked in the corporate sector. I understood the cutthroat environment within the corporate, where, as I mentioned earlier, everything's driven by profits, but things move quickly. And then transitioning to the humanitarian sector, it gives me a perspective, because now also a lot of humanitarian organizations want to incorporate some of the efficiencies that are brought about, by or innovations that are brought about from the corporate world, etc. So it puts me in a unique position where I know the value that can be that I can add just based on my my private sector corporate experience, but applying it in a way that is impactful. So no, I wouldn't change a thing.
That's new. I know many people who would want to change things. I, for one, would like to change a couple of things. And one of the things I would want to change, I would never work for free again.
Yeah, I don't know what you're thinking when you work for free, but anyway.
You are listening to the Huma Career Insights podcast. Remember to follow, rate, and share. So, how do you stay motivated and inspired in your current role?
It's not just my current role. It's all my roles. It's in fact almost a lifestyle where if I'm doing something, if you're gonna do something, it's worth doing well. So I immerse myself into it. I try and enjoy it. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not, but it's always better when you enjoy what you're doing. I build relationships. I learn. I never settle. So that's how I stay motivated. I always want to learn. How can we do things better? How can we be more efficient in what we're doing? So that drive, that goal, keeps me motivated and keeps me inspired. And how can we be more impactful to the people that we serve, the people who need the help the most?
That's great. We talked about a process that we use in our coaching at Huma, and it's yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So I'd like us to look forward and talk about tomorrow. What future transitions or changes do you anticipate in your career, and how are you preparing for them?
Yeah, I prepare for change by continuously learning. I'm always trying to read and understand, what's the new thing out there. Sometimes it may be a shiny object that, does not impact, or it may be overhyped, but sometimes there are things that, innovations, cutting edge technology. So I'm in the technology field, so it's a little easy for me to talk about this. But yeah, I prepare for change by continually learning, keeping abreast with all these emergent technologies, things such as generative AI, your ChatGPTs, etc. Things called Web3, blockchain, all these fancy buzzwords. Try to first understand what they are, and then secondly, how can they be applied in my current situation or a future situation? What opportunities do these new innovations bring? What opportunities do these game-changing innovations and technologies bring? And then I start aligning myself and applying myself to then say, okay, if I have to transition, perhaps I need to get expertise in this particular area. So that is how I prepare, because again, it comes back to one of the first questions I answered, right? In terms of never settle, and never feel like you're not good enough to do it.
I'm so glad you mentioned AI. Isn't it overhyped? I'm hearing AI. Is it really going to take over our jobs and our lives?
So I look at AI as a tool to make our lives easier and better, right? And I look at it in the same way that I looked at, when the automobile was invented, or when the computer was invented, or when the cell phone was invented, right? So it did change lives for the better. Did some people lose employment? Yes, but it created far more opportunities than those that were lost. So, it was those people who went out and said, hey, we've got a new automobile that's here. What value or services can I add to it? And then you got secondary industries, guys supplying wheels, windscreens, radios, so all knock-on effects that came from the advent of the automobile. The cell phone, same thing. You got people building apps, etc. So for me, it's just a natural evolution of technology. And I think that, yes, it is a game changer. I think that the impact will be felt. And I do think that, yes, some careers may be impacted and affected. And this is where now you need to start thinking again about how can AI be applied in my field, in my sphere, whether I'm in IT, I'm in finance, I'm in health, I'm in M&E, whichever field you're in. How can the tools that are there apply to my situation, and what can I learn to make myself better and make myself indispensable going forward?
Yes, I think that's the best thing you can do, is keep learning and seeing how you can apply these new, whether they be fads, but you need to learn and see how you can apply those to what it is that you do, what your purpose is, your ikigai. Wow, look at the time. Funny how time flies when you're having fun.
I really enjoyed this. Thanks. Yes.
So did I. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights with us. It has been great. But unfortunately, we have to close off now. And I would like to get any final thoughts or words of encouragement for our listeners as they navigate their own career transitions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the key takeaways, it's almost a summary of this discussion, right? Be quietly confident. Learn, continuous, keep learning. I can't stress this enough. Don't get too comfortable. Network. Have your godfather, your godmother, people who speak about you behind closed doors. And most importantly, seek professional assistance. I mean, that's a winning formula. It's worked for me. I'm a testament as to, if you follow these things, you can successfully navigate your career. So all the best. And once again, thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Keith. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Humor Career Insights podcast, where we had a special guest who was sharing with us insights from his personal journey navigating career transitions. We hope you found the discussion insightful and empowering. This is the last episode in our series, Navigating Career Transitions. Remember, navigating your career path can be challenging, but with the right strategies and support, you can achieve your professional goals. If you have any questions, feedback, or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to especially hear from you if you'd like to share your story. Feel free to reach out to us on our website or social media channels. Our email address is info@humor.org. That is info@humhr.org. Don't forget to follow and rate our podcast to stay updated on the latest episodes, and share it with your colleagues and friends who might benefit from our insights. Until next series, take care and stay inspired.